Bloodwolf Arts Studio. Unleash the artist within.
Welcome to Bloodwolf Arts Studio, and I'm your host, Mr. Moonlight. So today I'm going to be talking about my next poem in my series, my collection of poetry, The Seasons of Life, Volume 1, Autumn. So before I get started, this poem and my next one, and I'll post that in my next video too, but I'm going to put in a trigger warning here for anybody who is sensitive to topics of, I would say, abuse, I would say neglect, sexual abuse, anything of that sort. This would be your point to dip out now um, before I dive into this. So, this one is titled The Double-Edged Sword. And this one was written on August 17th, 2011. This has been one of the more challenging ones for me to ever talk about. This was the first poem that I ever wrote where a lot of the really deep, darker stuff started to surface for me to actually process as a teenager. This one was written 7 years after the experience I had, and this was also the poem where I showed this one to my dad, and it's mentioned in the forward section of my first book. And I imagine my dad just, I imagine he didn't understand how hard it was for me to actually even go to talk to him about this or show him this. But this was the first, I think this was one of the first poems I showed my dad. And he told me that I should just get rid of it, destroy it, because of how negative and how low the feeling and energy was of it. Um, as disconnected and not really around as much as he was, then and just where he was, where he's at, whatever the reasons are that are there with my dad in his life, didn't grasp or pick up on that I could be struggling with something that I was. Um, but that was also I think that was one of the last times that I showed dad poetry after that. Um, but this poem was a lot about a lot of mental health struggles. There's a lot of crisis I was experiencing, a lot of stuff I had no idea how to process or even think about. And this was the very first time that I had the courage to express this experience, and I still kept it kind of vague. And the following poem that is after this one, that goes into, explores it just a little bit, a specific aspect of this. But this poem was a lot about shame, a lot about um, regret. Um, there was a lot about deciding I was a monster, a lot of things. But I mean, so this experience that this primarily focused on was when I was 12 years old and I had first started going through puberty. And, you know, growing up in the DCCS, there's, it's one of those topics, and I'm sure anybody who's been part of any kind of super religious family or organization can relate to this. But there's a lot of shame around sexuality, sexual exploration, anything of that sort. And I remember going through this puberty and first of all being caught off guard by it. No, no clue what was happening to my body, what I was going through, so many questions, and nobody I felt like I could talk to about it. And so, as kids do, it's naturally just exploring my body, myself, and attempting to put together pieces and figure it out because like I didn't talk. I don't remember if I don't think I ever talked to anybody about this because it was just one of those topics that was taboo. Um, but and it's also one of those things where it's like in the DCCS you don't ever really get to explore that part of yourself because you're not even really allowed to date until you're engaged to marry somebody, and then whoever you marry, it's like you're with that person forever. And so it's like there's nowhere really to explore this topic at all. It's like nobody wants to talk about it. So here I was about 12 years old and not sure what's going on with my body. And suddenly I have this experience, accidentally experienced my first orgasm, and and it really intrigued me. It was probably, and I think as I think back on it, it was one of those experiences where, as I reflect on it now, it was like one of the biggest, like it was such a big high, and it contrasted really to a lot of the lows that I was actually living in. That I was it's so detached from. I didn't realize exactly just how low and disconnected and isolated I actually felt as a kid. I mean, it's teenager. I mean, people experience that to varying degrees, but um, I definitely had experiences younger where I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And so when I got to experiencing this high, it was like, oh my gosh, like I love that feeling. And so, as kids do, started to naturally explore this feeling. And there was an instance where, um, and it's, I don't even remember like people who actually remember this, but um, so how do I describe this? Well, I'll just put it this way: there was one of my little sisters who I don't even know why this was even allowed or what even happened, but there were instances where she would sometimes sleep naked out in the living room, and so myself being curious, I decided I was going to go and start to sexually touch her. And because I was curious about the sensations and whatever, I was like, oh, I don't know what this is going to be like. And so I began to sexually touch her to stimulate myself. And then that happened about another, I think there was another couple instances I had, and she was asleep the entire time. Obviously, I was so terrified of being caught. I was terrified of to the extreme that there was something wrong with me. Um, and I remember, I remember distinctly there was three instances that I had sexually touched her, and then um, there was one after the third instance. Then I almost started to do the same thing with my other sister because I have two little sisters, and I remember hearing a voice or something that said, "What are you doing? That's not okay." You know, something inside me at the beginning already told me it wasn't okay. But at that point, I stopped. And that was the last time in my entire life that I ever crossed that line again. And, and at that point, I decided I was a monster. And I decided there was something wrong with me. And and you see this in the poem, you see the struggle where it's like my thoughts are saying, yeah, this is not okay, but then my impulses and stuff are saying, well, whatever, like the body wants whatever the body wants. And the intense struggle of that and the intensity of the experience. And after that point, and yeah, and this, yeah, I was 12. Um, and I remember, okay, like if I'm not doing that, then I need to find other ways to explore this. And that was when I turned into pornography. We had just barely gotten internet at our place. It seemed like, or we hadn't had internet that long. I don't think Google was kind of a relatively new thing. It was just one of those things. The internet was just kind of taking off. But I ended up finding pornography instead, and that was when that started to become an addiction. And even then, I prayed to God so many times after every time I would look at something pornographic that I would immediately after close everything down, and I would hide it, and then I would run and I'd pray to God and promise that I would never do it again. And then I would do it again, and it just became a cycle where I'm like, man, God, I'm fucked. Like, I'm hopeless. Um, I'm a bad person, and it's just evident because I can't seem to stop. And this was something that ended up shaping the tone that basically um, pulled me down most for the next, I'd say, 15 years. Long time. And it took me a long while to get out of that, to get out of those addictions and different things. You know, and, you know, stuff tapers around and flitters around here and there still. But um, that was really a huge turning point in my life. And as you read the poem, you can, I mean, it's such a, as you read through it, it's such a stark contrast to anything I'd written at that point. It was like something was clearly wrong. Um, but you can see a lot of the stuff in the poem: the beat up stick, the shame, the judgment. And if you can imagine a 12-year-old on the computer wondering if they're going to prison, that was me. I was Googling worst case scenarios. I was like, man, am I going to prison? This is going to ruin my life. This is going to be the end of me. Nobody's going to want me. They didn't want me before. They sure as hell ain't going to want me now. And there was one instance after this, and it was before I had started writing poetry. If I remember right, it was like a couple of years after this had happened. And I pulled my dad aside and I was going to tell him. And I was just about to say something. And then I stopped. And I said, and the feeling was, I can't trust dad. I can't even trust dad with this. And then the second time I opened up to dad, and not so many words, was when I showed him this poem. And then he told me to burn it. And it was just like, I don't know. I guess at the time it was just like, well, that confirmed it. I definitely can't trust dad with this kind of stuff. Because he just wants me to marry it and pretend it doesn't exist. Um, so uh, this ended up being one of those experiences that ended up being one of the deepest roots that really shaped a lot of my experiences in my life. And it's taken me a long time to unravel everything on top of this to finally get to the point of pulling up the roots. Hell, I didn't even publishing my books was fucking just no fucking way no one's ever gonna read this shit because no one's ever gonna see me and I don't want them to. But I was talking with my friend on my live stream because we're reading her books, and I shared with her about this, and she recommended I go through her book and use some of her tools, and I did. And the amount of insight that got me for this, excuse me, for this experience was profound. gosh, I'm like lost my train of thought. This was when I first shared this poem. Um, it was like one of the first times I really opened my heart. And when I slammed it shut, my dad said, "I better burn this." Like that was the point where I'm like, okay, well, I guess nobody gets to see what's going on in my heart anymore. But one of the insights that I got from going through those exercises was that this was the first point where, even if it was just to myself, I started to have the courage to at least whisper to myself that my experiences mattered and that I mattered. And it started something small. And I know it took me a lot of courage just to write that. And it's taken me different kinds of courage to put this here. But really, in the DCCS, this is not abnormal. I know there's a hell of a lot more that goes on than people say. And I know it's not just a DCCS issue, but my God, is it buried in there? Because this kind of stuff is just completely, and this wasn't even. This is only surface of what goes on and what people in the order, DCCS, whatever. The kind of shit that gets excused when people look the other way. This is the kind of shit that happens every goddamn day. And it has to stop. But it captures a lot my confusion and my shame, my misery of my experience. So I go through this. I'm going to be shortly doing my other video I've got behind, because so many things have come to a boil in my life right now. So many things are changing. And so the next one there is also going to be a trigger warning for the next one. And I'll be posting those trigger warnings every time I get into a poem. It kind of goes into stuff like this. So I'm going to have that posted right after this. I'm having issues with my TikTok account. It's not letting me post videos anymore. I don't know if I'm going to post anything else on there. I might just primarily go to this platform, at least for now. So I think this was the last one that let me post on TikTok. So you can find it on TikTok. Otherwise, it's going to be after this video. So stay tuned for that. There's a link to my books down in the description below. And remember to follow my YouTube channel and my Facebook, Blood Wolf Arts Studio, and my TikTok. My handle across all my platforms is Mr. Moonlight Rhyme. So feel free to follow those and follow along. And so thank you for tuning in, and welcome to my side of the moon.
The Double-Edged Sword by Aaron Brown. The days are slow, the nights grow short, mind and body clash. Blood-stained sword, the handle is sharp. I'm left with a gash. Since I was a lad, times now lost in time, the handle was on the grind. Too young to know, ignorant I was. Apparently I was blind. Now I always bleed, stuck against my will with this accursed sword. I cry for help. I can't do this on my own. Why can't they hear my words? My words are lost. They can't hear them. They're only in my mind. The sword invisible, words unseen. There's nothing there to find. Dark screams curdled with blood. I fear to run for help. People I know just cannot help. I can only seem to weep. I feel ashamed telling others my woe. They always say theirs. Then I don't dare, feeling so selfish. I have no right to share. They have problems just like me. I'm not alone. Then on to the cycle. It never does end. I feel like a drone. Mind and body, body and mind. The fight just never ends. What do? Do I pray to make my misery end?